Welcome to Aspects of Writing with your host, James Kelly. For the next 60 minutes, we'll explore every aspect of writing, including how to create, format, and even sell your work. Now, let's get writing. Here's your host, James Kelly.
Hello and welcome to Aspects of Writing. I'm your host, James Kelly. My co-host for today's show is Tonya Todd, and our guest is Richard McDonald, Rena Winters, and Markiss McFadden. And the topic of the show is writing scripts. So, Tonya, I'm going to let you start off. Why don't you introduce Rena, or at least what do you know about Rena?
Well, I know that she wrote a really fascinating book about Smurfs.
Rena, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Well, I was a writer in Hollywood for a lot of years with television shows, and I wrote a couple films. When I moved to Las Vegas, the first book effort was about the Smurfs in the animation industry and subliminal programming of young children's minds. And then I went on to write 4 other books since then, and I teach at the College of Southern Nevada here. I teach creative writing.
All right. And Markiss, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, Markiss McFadden started out only as an actor back in 2009. About 2013, I decided to start my own production company. My first film was Love Triangle. Back in my early acting days, I actually booked a gig, Transformers 3, which actually allowed me to start my own production company. I produced, directed about 13 to 14 films so far, currently in pre-production for about 3.
And you have a television series coming up.
Yes, and a television series coming up.
Just to name a few.
Well, let's not forget about that one. That's the big one.
Yeah, a few things going on.
All right. And Richard, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
I'm like Markiss. I'm started mainly as an actor, and then I saw that there wasn't a lot of work present. And I had talked to a few different people that said creating your own work is really powerful and really important. So I ended up writing and creating a short film that I just released, and it's making the film festival circuits called Ethically Ambiguous. I'm in the process of writing 2 other short films related to that one, and then I have a TV series in mind and another feature film in mind.
And Tonya, why don't you introduce yourself? You're with the Henderson Writers Group. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background?
I am the education chair for the Henderson Writers Group, and I run a monthly author meet and greet called Dime Grinds. I'm also an actress who has worked with Markiss.
All right. And we're going to be talking about script writing today. This is Aspects of Writing. I want to start off with, always in the past have asked, and this is interesting. I think I asked you this, Richard. I can't remember if it was you I asked. What software people use when it comes to writing a script. Did I ask you that? I think I did when we were on the phone.
Did.
Yeah. And he taught me something I did not know. Because we're used to Final Draft. We're used to Scriptwriter. We're used to, there's a lot of different software out there. But you were telling me about Word has a format. And you must know about that as well.
I do.
Yeah, okay.
I do. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Richard.
I'm very new into this, so when I was looking at making my short film, I just popped up and started writing anything on Word, and then they have that template thing, and then I typed in screenplay, I think is the template, and it popped up, and so I just started using it, and everybody was saying all the different formats that you mentioned, James, and I was like, okay, but this works for me, and I don't have to buy anything, I don't have to purchase anything, practically everyone has Word. So I would strongly recommend those of you out there with looking at making scripts. If you have Word, there should be that template in there, and you can go to work. Nice. And it's fairly easy to use from what I see.
So, Rena, what do you know about that? Because I know you teach creative writing.
That's one of the things that I teach in my class, because not everybody is real techie, and learning some of the script writing programs takes some technical knowledge and time. And only if you're going to do a lot of scripts really should you invest in it and do it. Otherwise, you can use Word. And I want to encourage both of you young producers and writers that so many powerful people today started out writing their own screenplays and then using them. And I'd like to tell you that Steven Spielberg's one, Francis Ford Coppola is one, John Carpenter, Woody Allen, George Lucas. They all started out script writing either for other people and then eventually started doing their own things that they worked with. So that's the way to go, guys. You're on the right track.
I wrote a script back in 1980. Anyway, there's at least 3 people on this panel who weren't even born yet. But
Gee, thanks.
well, I was including you, Renee. No,
I won't say a word. I will not say a word.
I mean in the studio. Now, anyway, I didn't know how to write a script, and I was living in Atlanta, Georgia at the time. So I went to Georgia State University. I was actually taking classes there at the time. So I went to the library to learn about writing scripts. I didn't realize there was software out there. And I looked at the various techniques that some of the writers were using in Hollywood. And actually, I think it was Woody Allen. Mm-hmm. He didn't use your typical format for writing scripts. And so I thought, well, I like the way he writes. So I used that format. And then come to find out, it's really not what Hollywood expects, you know. But, you know, hey, it got the attention of someone, you know. Yeah. So that was what
whatever
was important.
Works.
Yeah.
Script writing is the hardest thing to do. I teach that in my class.
I know.
I think it's the hardest style of writing that there is because you have a visual medium occurring at the same time, and it has its own language. I mean, it has words like transition, slug lines, you know, VOs, OC, montages. It has its own vocabulary that you have to learn about what you're doing.
Very true.
But see, I think we talked about this in a show in the past, Renee. I find it easier to write a script, but I think it's because that's what I wrote first. I didn't write a novel in the beginning. I wrote a script. And to me, it was so easy to write that because of the format. And then from there, what I did, I would take a script and write a book from that script.
You did it backwards.
I did it backwards. But you know why it seemed easier for me? Because a script is typically 90 to 120 pages.
Right. Exactly.
And then a novel, you should have at least 200 to 300 pages. So you can expand on what you've written as a script and give more direction and more details. So that was easier for me. Because if you think about it, if you take a novel, now you have to convert that in, you have to shrink it down to 90 to 100. Yeah.
I don't know why. I think that's easier.
You think that's easier?
Yeah, because you got a lot of content, and you just break this content down.
I'm just backwards. That's all I can tell you. I'm just backwards. So, Richard, what's your experience with? I know this is your first produced film, but what other scripts have you written, or have you written anything else yet?
So, the interesting thing that you were sort of talking about is, so I wrote, directed, and starred in, and so in the process, I saw how much language you can use as just somebody, and I come from a theater world, so you have to sort of say everything. And then the visual medium, what can be said without speaking? So I shot, and we're in post-production for my second film, and it's predominantly a silent film. We'll probably put some music into it, and then I have this little part I speak at the end. But the idea with that, James, was to try what can be said with the visual medium. So in that process of writing, it was, okay, what is this saying, instead of, you know, my character actually going, oh, I'm waking up, oh, I'm tired, or whatnot. So that was a nice
the exposition versus saying it.
Exactly. And I think, to Marcus's point about taking a 300-page book and converting it into a script is wonderful, because James, or anyone that's written, you know, you have these things about visually like what it looks like, so then you could just have the camera pan over that rather than, you know, whatever exposition you want to write. And I think that that's wonderful to pull from and be like, oh my God, I can see that images, I can see this, I'd love this shot, I'd love it to shoot from this angle, or these kinds of things. And I could see a push in, I could see a pull out, all these different things come into play, and your brain just starts going boom, 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 firing.
Well, I'm gonna dialogue though. How do you deal with that?
I'm going to let you guys keep talking. I'm going to adjust the camera. We can't see Tonya that well, and I know I'm very unprofessional here. We're doing this in the middle of the show, but I want to make sure we see her. Now we can see her. Right. But I'm going to adjust that camera just a little bit, so you guys keep talking.
All right.
Tonya, what was your question?
What about the challenge of dealing with internal dialogue, the thoughts of your characters without being able to say it?
I think I think with that, you're hopefully setting up the scene so that your actor or actors understand the world and understand what's happening. So it just so happens with that film I was describing, my second one, I was the main actor again, so I knew what was going on. But I think that's also part of whatever you're transforming onto the page and taking maybe from the source material and sort of saying, okay, what are we trying to convey? Because the other thing I'm big on is even just a set shot that's on a tripod. What is everything in that shot saying? What is that photo in the background? What is that book? Any of those sort of things, are they helping tell the story? Are they adding? Are they subtracting? Or are they enhancing? So I think if that answers your question.
Yeah, I have a question for everyone. When you're writing your scripts, do you have a vision of who that character is in your mind? I'm going to start with you, Renee.
Absolutely. You have a very strong vision of who they are. And going along with what Richard said, the visual can carry a lot of that. You don't need as much dialogue. You don't need as much verbiage because the picture can give and portray what's happening. On the other hand, the dialogue and the script has to be poignant. It has to touch people. It has to reach them.
Well, the reason I asked that question is because oftentimes I brought this up once before. I knew the director of Saved by the Bell, and when they were auditioning the kids for the cast, and I never remember her name. The young lady who played, she was the only black character in that television series. That was written for a Jewish girl, but when she auditioned, they said, "That's her. This is right." So your whole perception of what you think is in a script may not necessarily be the right character for, or the right person for that character.
Right.
Or someone can change your mind anyway. Maybe it's the audition. I don't know. Maybe it's the person.
It is something to keep in mind during auditioning. Just because you don't fit the role doesn't mean you shouldn't audition.
That's what I was trying to get at. Yeah, exactly. So in other words, don't go into it thinking, I'm never going to get this anyway.
Exactly.
Of course not.
And I think, Markiss, that is your attitude. Because you shared with me you don't have problems in Hollywood at all with anyone pigeonholing you in a certain way. And I think it's your attitude. It's like, oh, that's me. That's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in society as a whole, that's the way we all have to be sometimes. We have to walk into something. You had to do that, Renee, in Hollywood.
Absolutely.
She became an executive producer, and she had to place demands. Tell them the story. I love this story. Tell them the story of when you were getting a promotion to an executive producer's position, and the two guys who were hiring you didn't know what to pay you.
They got into an argument over what to pay me, and I knew, being a woman going for one of the top positions, executive vice president, that they would not pay me what they would pay another man. So finally, over lunch one day, they said, everybody write down a number on your business card, on the back of the business card, and the closest to is what we'll pay you. Well, ironically, we all three wrote the same number, and I got hired instantly.
Nice.
Perfect.
Nice.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And you were there in the 80s and 90s, I'm presuming.
Yeah.
I don't want to say too much.
Yes, I was there 80s, 90s, early 2000, and then I moved to Las Vegas.
Yeah. So, and I do want to know what's different. And Markiss, this goes for actually everyone, including you, Tonya. What's different when it comes to writing something as opposed to performing something? Because you've all been actors. As the actor, you're reading a script. That's one thing. Do you think sometimes, because I hear this a lot in Hollywood, you'll be reading a script and you'll say, that's not my character.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that do you get a chance to say, and how true is it that you can change the way the script is written?
Depends on the director. Some people want it to feel organic. They want you to own the character, and they're open to you expanding on what they
Interpretation.
wrote. And, I've heard it said, is it on the page? Then it's up to you.
Okay. But how about you, Markiss? What's your experience with that? Because you've been in quite a few big films.
I mean, personally, I always give my opinion, like all the time. I mean, as an actor, you have this character in your mind a certain way, and it could be a little different from how the director sees it. But I'll always, all the time, if I feel passionate about it and I don't think my character would say this or do that, I would say something. And 90% of the time they go with how I feel about it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, as someone who writes scripts and you're directing them as well,
Yeah.
how lenient are you with your cast?
Oh, I'm all about freedom.
Okay.
Because as an actor, I know how to identify with the actors. They love it. So anytime somebody come to me and have an opinion about something, I'm always open to listening to what they have to say about it. But the thing when it comes to screenwriting is that it changes all the time. From
It's fluid.
when you're thinking about it to when you put it on paper, when you get into the rehearsals, when you start filming, and it constantly
Literally on the
changes.
set that day.
Literally on the
Right.
set that day, whatever feels great. So I'm all about what feels right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that really is that's a huge difference if you think about it between a novel and a script for those reasons.
Exactly.
Because it can morph into something completely different than what it started out at.
I think when you go to auditions, you have to play it the way you believe it in your heart.
100%.
Right.
And if you believe it strong enough, many times you can change the attitude of the producer or the director in their mind, what
Very
they're
true.
looking for.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, they see your interpretation, and if they like it, you may get the job.
Exactly. It's
But
all
you
about
do need to
owning
make a
it.
choice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just own whatever
Exactly.
choice you make.
Richard, I saw your short, so I know what it's about, and I'm just curious of that. How much of that is true? What was in there? I mean, when you go to an audition, are people looking at you because of the way you look, as far as your ethnicity or your size, or are all those elements that someone's looking at when you're going for an audition?
I think, fortunately and unfortunately, that would be the rule with anyone. So you walk into the room, because it's a visual medium, that they need to see, they're looking at you and they need to know, okay, what is this person, what do they carry? What are they looking like? So Markiss looks as though he's somebody who could be in the military. So you were in Transformers 3. And so he has that commanding presence. So you could be like, oh yeah, I could see him looking that way.
Mhm.
On top of that, obviously he's, a black man. So great, we can get our diversity check off list if that is going through their mindset. And this is honestly some of the feelings that I get with casting people. And so then now, okay, he's going to speak his lines. Okay, great. He did it really well, and I believe it. And oh my God, he's bringing something. But to what everyone was saying is, I completely agree about a choice. I think all too often actors will go in and try to do what they think is right. Or what they think is wanted, rather than going, well, this is how I would do it.
Exactly.
And,
going hoping they do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly, Markiss. Yeah. And it's just something where you have to commit to that. Mm-hmm. But I think from a writing perspective and from casting perspective, you have to have a vision or something in mind. Definitely you could be very open to have it be an open ethnicity. Mm-hmm. But you have a thought of like where it's going. Particularly for mine, I needed it to be strict with some of the ethnicities because it's
for sure
it's pushed by that. So I had to make sure it was authentic. Mm-hmm. And part of my film is about authentic storytelling. It's about who should be telling these stories, rather than what happens so often still is whitewashed. Is instead of it played by an Asian person, it's a white person, or a white person dressed up, or blackface, or brown face, or all these things. So that's kind of.
The other thing you mentioned about diversity is also tall, short, fat. I know I lost parts because I'm tall, and they would say you can't play opposite our star. He's not that tall.
Yeah, that happens.
That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can only really speak from an author standpoint for the most part. I mean, I've written scripts, but I've never sold a script. One thing that is interesting is and Tonya, you've been on a show where we've talked about this as well. When I wrote one book, I originally wrote it without describing the characters because I wanted it to be as diverse as possible. I didn't want to be pigeonholed, and I wanted someone who's reading the book to relate to it no matter what. But what I discovered is that when I went back to an editor, she said, you need to describe these characters. And I said, but why? And then it dawned on me, because mine was about a specific race.
Oh.
Well, you have,
plot.
and I didn't realize that the plot of this really dealt with the fact that it dealt with diversity in a sense, but it was about how a specific race created us here on Earth.
Right.
I had to go do that. And I did it, but I'm like Tonya, and I know, Tonya, that's your passion too, is to try to create more diversity in what we see and what we read. And I believe in that as well.
Because that's more true.
It is more true to life.
Yeah.
But then I realized with what I wrote, well, in my case, it wasn't. But the great thing about a script is when it comes to producing something for the film or television, it doesn't matter what the script is, really. I mean, you can almost take... Well, I don't know if you could take Medea and change that or not, but there are some things that you can write, and it really doesn't matter who's playing the part.
Right, that's true.
I'm trying to think of films where I know that has happened. It is an interesting thing, whereas with a novel, and you can talk more about that, Renee, than I can. With a novel, because you were a couple Westerns, or certainly one.
Yeah.
Obviously, you had to be talking about where you were with, whether they were Hispanic or whether they were white or whatever, because that's where they were.
The locale happened to be in Mexico in the
Yeah.
And so you had to, you had Mexicans, and then you had white people, and you had cowboys, and you had all different types. You had urban people. And
I know people from Mexico who are not brown-skinned, who are actually blonde-haired and blue-eyed and were born and grew up there. Yeah. That's another thing we fail to realize, that in this world today, it does not matter, because we want to look at it in a certain way. Because if I'm thinking Mexico, I'm immediately thinking of someone who's of brown-haired, darker skin, and that might not necessarily be the case.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times people who are Spanish speakers come up to me and start speaking in Spanish, expecting me to understand. It's like, no habla español. But that's a lie. That sentence in itself is a lie.
It's interesting you touch on that, because my last book, Holy Cause, is about terrorism. And that's the point, is that the terrorist is not who we expect it is. It's not a 25-year-old slightly dark-skinned, dark-haired young man. The terrorist can be a woman, can be a child, can be anyone. And we have to be far more alert about that.
Yeah. When it comes to writing, actually the very first thing I wrote, it was just something stupid. I decided I was watching General Hospital. We were out of work. I was living with someone. We all were put out of work at the same time. And I was sitting there. At that time, we only had 3 television stations.
So
boy, does that date me. I know. And so, she was doing her exercises, watching General Hospital, and I'm forced to watch this if I wanted to watch TV. And
forced.
Well, sort of. By the third by the third day, I actually was hooked. But the funny thing is, I'm sitting there thinking, this is so stupid. Why am I watching this? And then I said to her, we can write as good as this. And so anyway, we decided that we would sit down and write something. And I did. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I worked with someone whose brother was in Hollywood. And she loved it. And she says, can I send this to my brother? And you don't know who anyone really is. And so she sent it to her brother, and he loved it. And he said, can you create 16 episodes? I would like to make this the pilot.
Nice.
And then create 16 episodes around it. So we went back to the drawing board. I still had no idea what I was doing. I did not write in technical Hollywood format, but they probably could care less. And so I created 16 episodes, and he was pitching it for about 6 months in Hollywood. And then there was another television series about to go on the air called Hotel. And so and ours was very similar.
You already saw the punchline, didn't you?
He probably doesn't even know what Hotel is.
But he's familiar with another product too similar.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, so anyway, what happened is that it got nixed. And I didn't know what that meant. I'm going to be honest with you, Renee. I really had no clue, because I know you were around Hollywood maybe a few years later. And, I didn't know what it meant to have a producer interested in your work, because it was just a hobby. It was just something I was doing out of boredom. Would die for it today. And, and the thing is that I didn't even write my first novel or produce my first novel until 1995. So there was that huge lapse in time when I'm thinking, you had a connection and you let that go. Yeah.
It's interesting you said hotel because I had written a script called Tropicana, which was very similar to that.
Okay.
And then they came along with hotel, and mine got blown out too.
Yeah. And I wrote from what I actually knew at that time. I was a captain in room service at one of the hotels here in Las Vegas. So my characters basically dealt with that whole aspect of what if cocaine was brought into Las Vegas and how would it be distributed and, how would the captain get involved? And that's how it all took off. And then from there, But anyway, it's interesting. My reasoning for saying that is that how different is it to write for television as opposed for movies? What I wrote was really a movie, but then they said, well, we'll turn that into a 2-hour pilot. Mm-hmm. And then from there, they would pitch it as a television series. What I wrote was really more of a movie, and then we went back and created episodes. So what's the difference in writing for television and... Because an episode that's 30 minutes or an hour is not the same as writing a 1-hour movie or a 1.5-hour movie.
Very true.
I would say it in one word, discipline. Writing for television, you are committed to have something at a certain length by a certain date, and it has certain parameters that are allowed on television. So it's discipline, and that's one thing that very often writers do not have.
You have to think about commercial time. You have to know when to end a scene and when to start a next one. Whereas when you're writing a movie, you don't really have that.
No.
There is no intermission.
No rules,
unless it's
really.
a 3 or 4 hour movie,
No
like the old days.
Yeah.
Because I remember even when I was in Atlanta, the big thing they used to do there, they always show a lot of the old movies. They have one of the original old theaters that Fox built back then. And I remember with a lot of them, they would have like an hour and a half or 2 hours, and then they'd have an intermission and go back and show the second part of the movie. Well, you had to find a way to cut that movie in half because it wasn't produced that way,
Right.
So.
Yeah. No, writing for television is discipline. You have to be a disciplined writer. You have commitments that you have to live with, and if you don't do that, you're not going to be there very long.
Yeah.
Markiss touched on writing for movies. It gets changed a lot.
Yeah.
Your original script will be changed many times, maybe by the director, maybe by the producer, maybe by the lead actor who refuses to say the words you've written.
Happens all the time.
It can be all kinds of things.
Right.
You have to be flexible and be able to go along with that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Markiss, you're writing a television show, so how different is that for you as opposed to writing a movie?
I just try to think of long term, like with the movie, it's about 90 minutes to 120 max. Try to keep it 90, it makes more sense. When it comes to TV, I just try to think about, like you said, I take in commercials into consideration, not to try to show certain things if I want this certain market.
Right, and if you want to extend the television series, you want to always keep it a little secret here and there so you can expose things as you go along.
So like with
over
the
and
pilot,
over again.
it's like you kind of just plant a lot of seeds with the pilot. That way you have something to build on later. Certain characters, like some things that you wouldn't really, I forgot the term they use. What is it? Like when you hide little things, like only some may see it, some may pick up on it, some may not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like a gem or something like that,
Or even an Easter egg.
Easter egg. I'm thinking Easter, but I'm like,
It's Christmas.
Easter
that's why.
egg.
Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
When you're writing a script, like you said, the reason it's 90 to 120 pages is because each page represents 1 minute of screen time.
Exactly.
When you're writing for television, is it pretty much the same way? Because you do have to make sure you have commercial time written into the script.
You have to think about where those commercial breaks are going to happen. And of course, if it's a half-hour show, it's much shorter. You're writing like 24 minutes, 26 minutes, depending on the amount of commercials.
Right, and now even with online streaming, it's like a little
I was just about to say.
now.
Yeah.
You really don't have to worry about commercials too much.
Yep.
Oh, you don't have to.
I mean,
Depends on the
yeah.
network.
Like for me, for example, I haven't wrote something that's been aired on TV as far as a TV show. Like everything that I'm doing now, because I just started to get into TV, it's just been pilots. So I'm not even really familiar with too many of the rules, but I binge watch a couple shows, and the pilot could range anywhere from 40 minutes to like a little over an hour.
I find what's fascinating too with television is oftentimes, I don't know if anyone here has been watching The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Okay. What is interesting is there's one character in this specifically who was not written into the comics. and he's been able to sustain throughout the entire show. And you know, you do wonder how often things change. There's been characters killed that weren't killed in the comics, and then there's been characters that lived that did not live in the comics. So, you know, how much freedom do you have? I guess you have all the freedom in the world. I guess it's the audience's choice.
Exactly.
If you can keep an audience
that,
based on a character, and you don't want that character to go.
Yeah.
Although they killed off some pretty good characters in that, you know. So I don't know if I. You know.
But I mean, at the same time, though, you have to have something for the mid-season finale or the season finale, and usually it's taking out somebody we care about.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you know.
Or you think they're gone until you open the next season, and then you realize, well, they fell off a cliff, but they survived somehow. You know,
right? You got a limp now or something.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's other reasons too about renewing contracts.
Oh, well, that's true too.
Whether they get rid of them or not.
That's true.
Know?
Or characters were difficult, so they wrote them out. Yeah.
Hollywood changes a lot from comics. When I started doing the fan films, something I wanted to really pay attention to was the comics. I wanted to stay true to the characters because, like I said, Hollywood changes like major things with the comic books, you know? So I try to stay true to it. What I do, I take these characters that already exist and create an original story behind them. Mm-hmm. And I listen to the fans.
I'm just curious, what is everyone's... I always say I'm just as curious. That's one of my things. When it comes to... Like, I went and saw Spider-Man last night, but I saw...
Can't wait to see it.
It was good.
It was excellent.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But it was the cartoon type version. I call it cartoon, animated version. Mm-hmm. What is different in writing animation as opposed to live action?
Well, the stunts are easier if you draw it.
You don't have to hire as big a crew.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like production value, you have a lot more freedom to do certain things. You know, if you wanted to jump off a building or blow this building up, it's a lot easier to do it animation versus can I buy this building? I want to blow this up.
You guys have one shot on this.
Right.
Animation, though, is a very expensive medium.
And you were in animation,
yes, it is.
So you know.
It is a very expensive medium. There's good animation and bad animation. And bad animation cannot sustain a wonderful story, no matter how good the story is. It'll ruin it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it actually is the artist who are responsible for making it work. As much as anything.
And you have to have a good story.
And a good story. Yeah. And, you know, the acting part, everyone thinks, oh, well, you're just sitting in a booth, and how much acting is there to that? There's probably quite a bit. You still have to have in fact, it would be harder, I would think, because the emotions have to come through on the mic.
Look at Robin Williams' Genie. Like, that was not someone's drawing.
Yeah.
He made that.
Well, that's true. That's true. And I know
they say...
Go ahead, Richard.
Well, I was just going to say, back to Tonya's point, I think 90% of his dialogue was improvised.
Right. They just let him go.
They just let him.
So they did the animation based on what he was saying.
Right.
That's what that's the impression I got. Yeah.
The other thing is you're not always working opposite an actor where you can play off of them and get that feeling. Many times you're recording it just by yourself, your part. And so you have to be a pretty good actor to get it across.
Has anyone sitting here done an animation other than, I know you have, Renee?
Yeah.
I have, actually.
Okay.
Yep. Just thought about it. Early on in my career, I did. And it was interesting.
Someone told me what you did. What were you in?
It's a movie called King of the Underground.
Oh, yeah.
And I played young Kenny.
Someone talked about you last night about that. So.
Oh, right. Yeah, and it was cool. Like she said, you're not acting in front of anybody, so you have nothing to go off on. You're not exchanging emotion at all. It's just literally reading the lines and kind of saying how the director would like you to say it. It's challenging. I think it's more challenging than acting for TV or film. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Richard, have you done anything with animation?
No, but to Marx's point, and to say this it is a sign of an actor, because what you have to do is to say a line in multiple ways, and a good actor, a trained actor, knows what to do with a line. And sometimes a young actor or an actor that's hasn't had that kind of training, they have to get help or they have to be coached, and it might be really hard or difficult for them. But for somebody who one of the things some actors work with are actions. So if you're saying a line, you can say a line and you can flirt it, or you can demand, or you can do these kinds of things with it. And if you've practiced that, you're given a line and you're in that booth, you could be like, I'm going to demand with this line. Okay. And then they're like, give it another way. And so you do it a different way. And then they'll record you saying a line 10 different ways. And then in the production, they're going to go, I like this way. Yeah. I like that way. Because it's not film footage. It's not set pieces. It's not everything. Because in normal film, you can't get 10, 15 times because the lighting might be off. The person walked, the sound might be off. But if it's animation, voice over, essentially, voice, you can do it 10 times and you're only in the booth for like an hour or something like that, and then you leave. And
exactly.
So that's speaking to Markiss's point, about got to be good and got to be on. It's hard.
Yeah.
Well, I remember when Avatar came out. That was basically done. Oh, is that what you were going to say?
I was about to,
yeah. And it was done on, the actors knew that it was going to be green screen behind them.
Yeah.
And then they had that equipment they had to have on as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, think about how uncomfortable that would be. And you've got to play that part as
dive in still.
Yeah. And pretend all that's all around you and it's nowhere.
Exactly.
There are some actors who think that should be its own course, is learning how to act with a green screen, because it's different. It's different from theater. It's different from regular film.
Yeah, that's very true. Like when I did Transformers.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a moment when I was in the helicopter. In the movie, it's real action packed. It's loud. You hear explosions in the background, people yelling and screaming. But in actuality, like I said, I was in a plane and I was sitting there. It was very quiet. It was a blue screen right here on this side of me, and I had to be real panicked. I had to act like my life was in danger. About to crash. And it was my part. This is my first time acting on, the blue screen with Michael Bay right here in front of me. I better do what I'm supposed to do.
You won't be on that set anymore.
Yeah. So, but I did my thing. He really liked it, but it was completely different because I'm very comfortable, and I display a lot of vulnerability when I'm acting with another actor. I'm very open. So when I'm there and I don't have an actor with me, I have this blue screen. Is like it's very different. I'm not even sure how to...
You almost have to put yourself in another universe, like take yourself out of there.
Yeah. And you have to dive in to another level.
Right.
There's a synergy when you're acting with other people that you're getting some
feeding off
energy
of them.
Exactly. And when you're acting by yourself in a booth, or like you said with a screen, it's different. It's totally different.
You have to block out the real world and immerse yourself in this world.
So when it comes to script writing for that, then how do you get a mindset for that, or do you not worry about it?
I don't worry about it. Certain things like that, I kind of just take the risk.
The reason I'm asking you this is I'm working on a script that deals with a book that I wrote. I wrote the script, but I realized this isn't going to work. When I write, I have a tendency to write in the present tense, which is more like the way you would write a movie. I do that because I write it as a movie, and I want people to visualize it like you would a movie when you're reading it.
Right.
I realized, what I wrote, this, you couldn't possibly put together a crew like this, unless it's Ben-Hur or Cleopatra, and then who's going to spend that kind of money to produce anyone's film these days?
Right.
You do think about the blue screen or the green screen because that's what they would have to do. Have any of you, when you've written anything, when it comes to a script, do you keep that in mind?
Yeah,
I think you do, but I think it's more important to keep in mind the story.
Okay, so you don't worry about that element?
No.
Yeah, when I first wrote my first film, I was free when I wrote it because I just wanted to get it out and write it. And then after I did that film, I learned, okay, I need to start writing within the means, So I would put these barriers up for myself that it would make me compromise. Like I can't have this huge building. I can't make the building on fire and people evacuate, and I got to find a way to still tell the same story using a different resource, something that I can obtain. So when I'm writing, I take everything into consideration. depending on the budget. I write within the means of the budget.
I think that's what I'm trying to get at. When you're writing something like that, as a script writer, that is something you have to be conscious of, because you have to realize the reality of getting a script even produced today is very slim, unless you do it yourself.
Right.
And even when you're doing it yourself, then you really have to worry about a budget. That's when the budget really comes into play.
I should mention, now that you say that, we are having at the next Las Vegas Writers Conference, Tegan Koziak will be there, and she's taking pitches.
Okay.
For movies, television shows.
Oh, thank you.
That's not something that we get that often in Vegas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah. And it is interesting how those can work, because we actually, Amanda Skinador found her agent by going to someplace and pitching it to a literary agent.
It was the Las Vegas Writers Conference.
So it really can work. I've gone to these pitch fest in L.A. where you sign up, you get 5 minutes to pitch your work. Oh, Renee's got a grin on her face. You go there, and the one I experienced is you go to a board. Before you get there, you get to know what production companies are going to be there. So you only pitch your script to people who might be interested in the genre that you've written for. You stand in line like cattle. And then when they open it up, you run to the board and you write your name. And when you're done, you get to do this with 8 different producers. So if it's filled already, then you have to find someone else hopefully you get to pitch to 8 producers. But the problem with that was now you have 5 minutes, and it's really not as easy as you think.
That don't sound easy.
Well, that's why they try to teach you to do a log line no more than 1 or 2 sentences, because if you can practice that, then when it comes to pitching your work, it's a little easier.
But by nature, writers tend to be introverts, and they find it difficult under 5 minutes to be able to talk about what they do. But it's something you have to learn and practice, because it's an important part of it. You have to be able to tell your story attractively.
Yeah, that's what I'm working on right now, honestly. Like I can have this amazing idea, and when I'm getting ready to tell it, it don't really sound amazing when it's coming out.
Yeah.
It was great in my head.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I know someone who's a pro at this, and you do too, Tonya. And I think you know Two Bears Medina.
No.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
You told me about it.
Okay. Well, Two Bears, his expertise is in pitching his work and selling it. What's it called when you just pitch it and they buy it and then it's on option? Mm-hmm. He's really good at getting options. And what he's good at is he has someone who helps him, but they just write a great log line, and producers are interested in it. Most of the stuff he's sold probably has not been produced, but it's the way that pitch is done, and it intrigues them enough that they'll option it. So he makes a living just optioning scripts.
Nice.
Now, he's had some produced as well, but, he really knows he's got that perfected. And that's something I want to learn to do. I have great story ideas, but, how do you convey this to someone in a short time that's going to make them want that script?
Exactly.
Auditioning, way easier than pitching your work.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Just remember what makes you different. You have to do something a little bit different to catch their attention.
You started out as a model.
Yes.
And then you got into acting. And I want to say this because even when because I years and years and years and years ago when I was little, now I started out as a model as well. And one of the things we had to do was learn to do commercials. And we often had to create our own commercials as a practice to get into shape, as they say, for, going out there and auditioning. That helps, I think, and it actually helps you as a writer when it comes to writing scripts. Because in a way, even though you may not be writing it down necessarily, if you're just rehearsing it over and over in your mind, and it's only like 1 or 2 minutes, and you've written a script. Today, if you watch commercials, a lot of them are mini movies.
Yeah.
Exactly. Many short stories have been made into feature films today, which is interesting.
Yeah. And Richard, you wrote a short story. I thank you so much, by the way, for sharing that. Did you have any idea of taking it further?
So to take a small step back to what we were talking about, what I would say to people is if they're thinking of making feature films or something like that, I think if you can go in a smaller realm and look at just making a short version of something and see if you can tell a story in a limited amount of time I think that's a great starting point rather than trying to go for 120 pages or a full-length feature. And I think from a writing perspective and a directing perspective, a lot of well-known directors, a lot of well-known people that are coming up through the ranks started in the short film genre and sold those things. And those can go to Sundance. They can go to Tribeca. So I think that's a wonderful way to start that ball rolling. In terms of my particular film, the way I went about it is, there's this great book, I actually even have it here. It's called Steal Like an Artist. And it's really good for anyone, just because there's nothing original. There really isn't. And the book goes through it. All of our ideas are maybe a combination or something. So the book led me to look at this Vin Diesel film that he did in the 90s. And this Vin Diesel film was about being multiracial. It was called Multifacial. But at the time, it wasn't in vogue as it is now. So he wasn't white enough for roles. He wasn't black enough for roles. So in a sense, then I decided, oh my God, that look is in now, this ethnically ambiguous kind of look of which I fall into. So I took the source material and I just copied it verbatim and just stole, literally, absolutely stole, and then fine-tuned it as I went along. So I went, okay, change to this. His originally was 20 minutes. 20 minutes is now considered a little too long. So it was like, let me try to get in that 10-minute range. And then just bringing in today's ideas, today's things into that and fine-tuning it to the point where I found, my film. I was able to shoot it. At the time I finished it, I thought I was one off, one done, that's it. Soon after, in the post-production, it became a trilogy. And it became this character, Ryan, what is happening with him, what else is happening with him, and what other stories can we tell about the industry or about his journey. So I shot out of sequence. I shot the third film in the trilogy, and that's the one that's mainly silent that I talked about before. And then there's a second film, which is going to be very dialogue heavy. I'm still working on that, and then we'll shoot that maybe in the new year. But now the idea might be that those will be in that 5, 6, 7 minute range, and maybe to combine them all into one, 30-minute-ish short film, but that's not the end all be all. That can happen. So that's kind of where my thinking has gone with the film and the journey.
I want to talk just a few minutes about, once you've got your script ready to go, what's different avenues or venues you can go to possibly sell that script? Because, you can sit on it. I know someone here in Las Vegas who sent me a script 6 years ago. I couldn't do anything with it. And so far, this person hasn't done anything with it. So I do want to talk a little bit about, when you have your ideas on paper and you think they're good enough to present, what are avenues you can take to get them presented? You mentioned having someone at your writers' conference. Mm-hmm. That's one way. I mentioned going to LA. You can query and get an agent or possibly a manager or a producer, but that's not easy these days. I know someone who actually produced their own film by going out there on Kickstarter and raising the funds. Mm-hmm. And they actually had someone who said, if we'll match you, they got what's called angel financing, mm-hmm. where we'll match you dollar for dollar, that whatever you raise on Kickstarter, we'll match that. And they did get the money, by the way. So I think there are a lot of different ways of doing it, but what are some of your suggestions for producing this, other than pulling out your credit cards and saying, here we go?
Well, today on the internet, there's different companies that will represent your scripts, and you can go that route too.
Like?
I can't think of the name of the one, but there definitely is one that you can submit your log line and your information, and they post them every week, and it goes to a lot of different producers, and if someone's interested, they in turn contact you then to see the full script.
Okay.
So that's another way to go. Right. Certainly an agent is a good way to go. If you
Markiss,
get an agent.
You said you produced some of yours out of your own pocket.
Yeah. I just produce my own.
So you're not afraid of taking a chance?
No, not at all.
And I think that's sometimes what people have to do as well. They just have to say, I'll do it myself. I don't need someone else to do it for me.
Because my first chance that I took was my very first feature called Love Triangle. And that came out a couple of years ago. And still today, I'm getting messages from people showing lots of love. I'm asking for a sequel. My distribution guy loves it. He wants a sequel.
Where can people see this?
Oh, Amazon, Hulu. It's on all VOD platforms.
Well, and I know Kelly. Do you know Kelly Schwartz? Anyone sitting in here?
Yeah.
Okay, so you know Kelly.
Yeah.
And Kelly did the one on Aliens.
Yeah.
And when it came out 8 years ago, it made the circuit, but it looked like it had died. And then just a couple of years ago, it had a what do you call it? Revival.
Right.
And then it was, it's been in Walmart. It's on Amazon. Amazon just purchased it not too long ago, for a movie.
Mm-hmm.
So even something that seems to be dead in the waters, you can bring back.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about distribution 20 years ago when I was trying to get a film off the ground. And there were two films I was trying to purchase. And one was by a dermatologist here in Las Vegas. And another one was by Bill Hellinger, who is a retired character actor that retired here. What was interesting is that both of them lost interest in their film because the distributors, one went bankrupt, and one ended up being a crook. But
Terrible.
But for whatever reason, they lost interest in their own films. But what I found at that time through another investor is that oftentimes a film that's shown some history of making a profit can still go out there and make it in the what back then was the video world. Right. So even if something's not successful on the theater circuit, it can still have grounds when it comes to like now Hulu or Amazon, or or what is it called, streaming when you download them. So there's a lot of different ways now to go out there and resell something. It's not any different than a book. I've had a book that I recently brought back from 2005 from the dead, and then I have my very first novel I'm getting ready to re-release as if it's new. So we can always take old ideas and reinvent them, I guess is the best way of saying it.
Richard, did you have any recommendations?
There's Blacklist is a friend of mine uses that site, and from what I know with that one, what he was telling me is he uploaded, and I think you can do television scripts, film, and you can get feedback from people. I think you might have to pay a little more. You can go back, and then they rank your script as well. So I think that's another great tool to use. And then, of course, if you know someone who's in the profession, so for instance, Markiss has done acting and has done some writing. So if you're familiar, know Markiss and be like, listen, Markiss, can you read my script? And then he can say, okay, this is where I think you can make some adjustments and changes. I was fortunate with mine that I was able to fine tune it from all these people I had met from school, from my wife's work, that were able to give me some suggestions. So I think that's part of this too, is just knowing that to fine tune it, and going also back to the when you're filming, something will always come up. Something's always going to affect the original intent that you had, either as a writer or director. And that flexibility or that change or that viewpoint of like, okay, why did I have this shot? Why did I write this way? Do I need that actor to say it exactly this way, or can they, have a little fun? Can they improv a little bit? When it comes to, and we've talked about this a lot today, story. It has to help. It has to enhance the story.
So the story has to be there, or you have nothing anyway.
Of course.
No matter.
And even with that being said, when you have dialogue and you're writing something out, blocking is everything. Because of blocking alone, you may have to change a lot of the dialogue because it just naturally doesn't make any sense,
Well, we're running out of time, so I would like to thank our guests, Richard McDonald, Rena Winters, and Markiss McFadden, along with our co-host, Tonya Todd. And I would like to ask you, Richard, real quick, where can we find out more information about you?
Probably my best social media platform is Instagram. And I'm at rjm.actor on Instagram. And then you can reach out to me and contact me.
Okay, and Markiss?
McFaddenFamilyFilms.com.
Okay, and Renee?
You can contact me at winters.rena@yahoo.com and also through the college.
Okay, and Tonya.
My website, mstonyatod.com.
Okay. All right. To find out more about our guests, you'll find links on the Aspects of Writing website. That will click on their picture and it'll take you to their sites. Just go to aspectsofwriting.com. There you will also find video information and YouTube channel. We will be on Roku TV. This show will also air on iHeart, iTunes, and about a dozen other different networks.
Nice.
12 different terrestrial stations. We're live at 1 o'clock p.m., but it's Pacific Standard Time on Saturdays. And then we rebroadcast the show on Blog Talk Radio at 9 o'clock on Sunday evenings, Pacific Standard Time. I haven't seen it yet, but I understand we're streaming on Amazon, so someone might want to check that out and let me know. I don't syndicate the show, someone else does. So if you'd like more information again about the show, just go to aspectsofwriting.com. Until next week, this is your host, James Kelly, reminding you, if you can dream it, you can write it. Thank you, everyone, for being on the show today.
Thank you. Love that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Aspects of Writing. We hope you will join us next week as we discuss every aspect of the writing industry. Until then, if you can dream it, you can write it.